30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program here. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
For today's podcast, it's my honor to welcome former astronaut and International Space Station commander, Colonel Terry Virts, along with 3 seasoned cinematographers. They are joining us today for a remote podcast from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral in Florida, where on July 9th at 9:32 Eastern Time, the same time and day that Apollo 11 took off 50 years ago, Virts and his crew will depart in a Gulfstream G650ER, an extended-range version of Gulfstream's G650 jet, in an attempt to break the round-the-world speed record for an aircraft flying over the North and South Poles. In doing so, they also hope to mark the start of the historic Apollo 11 mission to the moon. There's more to this story. Colonel Virts was one of a number of astronauts that over the years has been trained by Hollywood cinematographers in order to lens images from the International Space Station that have been used in various ways, including for archival purposes and for IMAX documentaries such as Blue Planet. Now, Virts is making his directorial debut with a documentary about this week's world record attempt. That's where Hollywood cinematography community got involved. James Neihouse is the cinematographer that trained Virts and numerous other astronauts to help them bring back images from space, and he will serve as director of photography for this documentary. He, along with cinematographers Richard Crudo and Jannicke Mikkelsen, are among the cinematographers positioned around the world to help capture footage for the documentary. To tell us about this effort and NASA's history with Hollywood cinematography community, today we're joined by Colonel Terry Virts, James Neihouse, Richard Crudo, and Jannicke Mikkelsen. I'm Carolyn Jardina. Welcome to the Hollywood Reporters Behind the Screen.
Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Welcome and thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Terry, we're going to start with you. The current world record is 52 hours and 32 minutes, and your target is 49 hours and 36 minutes. How do you intend to meet that goal?
Well, we're going to try and fly fast. The real challenge, I think, is going to be the ground stops. The flight time is going to be fairly fixed. That depends on winds, and if there's some weather we have to fly around, that could slow us down, or if air traffic control. But the big question mark for us really is going to be on the ground. So it's going to be kind of like a Formula One or NASCAR pit stop where we have to get gas, we have to get the airplane serviced, and we have to get the door closed and the flight plan done and taken off again. And we have to do that 3 times because we're stopping in Kazakhstan, Mauritius, and Chile. So I think the record is really going to hinge on how fast we do those ground stops. The navigation is very simple. You take off and fly north, and when the compass spins around over the North Pole, you fly south. Then we're going to head down to the South Pole and then turn around north again. So that's going to take us about 2 days.
And could you tell us a little bit about the jet and any other details?
Yes, so we're flying in a Gulfstream G650ER, and that's really what's going to make this record possible. It has a really fast speed. It goes at Mach 0.925, which is 92% of the speed of sound, which is really fast. It's basically the fastest jet in that size category in the world. And not only can it go fast, but it has very long legs. It can fly a long distance. So that combination of being able to fly a long distance, which means you don't have to stop for gas as often, plus you're flying fast, makes the G650 the plane we think we can beat it in.
And now, additionally, when you take off tomorrow, you are also using the start time to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11.
We are. The brain of this whole project, a gentleman named Hamish Harding came up with this idea 5 years ago to in honor of space exploration, and we're coming up on the Apollo 50th is the reason that we're doing this. And our takeoff time is going to be at 9:32 a.m. Eastern, which was the same time that the Saturn V lifted off when Buzz and Neil and Mike went to the moon almost 50 years ago.
For you personally, how did Apollo 11 influence your decision to become an astronaut?
It was the reason I became an astronaut. Actually, the very first book I read in kindergarten was about Apollo. It was one of those cardboard reader books with one line per page. I can still remember what it looks like. And I remember seeing these astronauts and thinking, man, they went to the moon. That's so amazing. And as a boy growing up, I had posters of airplanes and rockets and galaxies and, you know, a space shuttle poster. So it just kind of sparked my imagination, and it stayed with me my whole life.
What did it feel like when you made it to space?
Awesome. It's really impossible to describe. The feeling of weightlessness, you can experience it on Earth for a second or two, but when it happens and it doesn't stop and it doesn't stop and it doesn't, my last flight was 200 days. So for 200 days, you're weightless. Just being able to move around is alien. That's not something that happens on Earth, and it takes some time to get used to. And then the visuals, just looking out and seeing the Earth. I thought I knew what I was getting into. I'd seen IMAX movies since I was a kid, and I thought it was going to be normal. And then that first time seeing the planet is just really powerful. You have to really make an effort to focus because it's so beautiful.
Now, when you were on the International Space Station, you also lensed material that was used for the IMAX documentary Beautiful Planet. And James Neihouse, who's your director of photography on the documentary you're making about this particular project, trained you. Would you tell us a little bit about the experience of training? And then maybe, James, you could jump in and tell us a little bit about your experiences. You've worked with a number of astronauts.
Sure. I'll start it off and then I'll hand it over. So being on the IMAX documentary was my favorite thing that I did in space. I also think it was the most important because so many people will see it and be impacted by it. And I'm a camera guy by nature. You know, my kids are like, Dad, quit taking pictures. So for me, it was just the absolute perfect thing. It was so much to learn. There's so much more than just knowing how to take a picture. There's a lot of art behind the science, and I'll let James jump in here for that process.
Yeah, well, training astronauts is a fun job because you get people like Terry who are already into photography and want to really put their 110% into the effort. And dealing with folks like that all the time is just really made my job very easy. Terry, I think, shot most of A Beautiful Planet on his days off because they're very busy in space on the space station, and they don't have time for making movies. And I think every day off Terry had, he was sticking a camera out the window for an IMAX shot. So that was a lot of fun working with him, and I'm really excited to be able to do this trip with them on one more orbit.
Okay, now, so for this project, Terry, this is your directorial debut. Was it the IMAX project that inspired you to do this?
It was. That was really my debut into any kind of serious filmmaking, and little details like how important sound is or focus. You know, if you're out of focus by a little bit, the whole shot's ruined. Or if you're moving the camera, if you're panning it slowly, you're moving it too fast, because on the IMAX screen, everybody will get sick if it's moving too fast. So there was all kinds of little details that I learned that it kind of inspired me that this is what I want to do in life. I mean, it's really fun. Telling stories is how you impact people, and that movie really inspired me for that.
So, James, tell us about the cinematography during this mission. So where will you be? And as I understand it, you'll have someone on board. You'll have crews at the different pit stops. Tell us about the logistics. Yeah,
the logistics of this has been really interesting to do, especially in the short time period that we've had to do it. The 1st of June, I didn't have this project even on my radar, and then right now we're about to take off tomorrow to go around the world. And because of that, we've had to put people into Kazakhstan, into Mauritius, into Chile to be our on-the-ground crew. We've got 4 or 5 camera crews here at the Kennedy Space Center who will be covering the takeoff and landing. We've got a crew on board the airplane, which consists of Terry and directing and shooting, and Jannicke Mikkelsen, I always say her name wrong, and she's looking at me very strangely, is going to be shooting and in charge of the live stream, which is a big deal on this flight. And I just found out right before we started this conversation that I will be flying at least as far as Mauritius on the flight. So I just got I don't know, it was a promotion or a demotion.
Jannicke, will you tell us about your role and responsibilities?
My responsibility is the connectivity to the satellites around the globe. So it's not as straightforward as it sounds. It's not like connecting to the internet and you're always connected, because satellites cannot orbit over the North Pole and the South Pole. We are live streaming this mission for a 48-hour live stream. There are areas on the globe where we want to have connectivity, and my job is to make sure that when we do have connectivity, that it is the best possible, in addition to also filming the documentary as a cinematographer. So there are two productions happening. One is a documentary and the other is a live streaming. We are using same cameras for documentary filming and live streaming. To achieve live streaming, this has never been done before. By connecting two satellites, we have 4 dedicated satellites to us orbiting the planet. And last week, we started dialing them into our flight path. We are getting extra satellites also beamed in to cover our locations for Chile, Peru, and other areas. We will not have satellite coverage over the North Pole and the South Pole, and we will focus on the documentary, maybe potentially also sleep. Technical requirements is beaming the signal from the aircraft to the satellites, from the satellites to a ground receiver, from the ground receiver to a cell tower. This will be from a 4K production for the documentary down to a 1080 signal for the ground. Now, once that signal hits the ground, it becomes a cell tower signal, and it will stream like a regular social media live stream.
And Richard Crudo, who's also joining us. Richard, you're going to be at Kennedy Space Center for the takeoff, correct?
Yes, I am. I am tasked with covering the launch and the arrival from the tower, which should be an interesting place to be for that moment. And the entire effort, I'm just honored to be here. I thank my good buddy James Neihouse sitting next to me for bringing me in. As seems everyone, I am just, as a kid and right through adulthood, have been obsessed with the space program. I was 12 years old when they landed on the moon, and as we all do, remember exactly where I was at that moment. So this has some emotional resonance as well, and it's great to go back to a little bit of documentary-style shooting, which is how I pretty much started my career as a cinematographer. And I'm just very, very pleased to make a contribution to this project.
Now, Richard, you're a past president of the American Society of Cinematographers, which is celebrating its centennial this year. But there's really quite a bit of history between Hollywood cinematographers working with NASA and the space program in general. Would you elaborate on that?
Well, going all the way back to the beginning of the space program, many of our cinematographers were involved in documenting what was happening. A lot of the, telemetry and things like that, the cameras out on the rocket ranges going early on, a lot of those things were calibrated and set up by our members. And then we have a number of astronauts who have become honorary members of the ASC just by virtue of having taken photographs and movies on a place not the Earth. The first people being Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins, of course, and a couple of other shuttle astronauts after that. So there's always been some hand of the ASC and a little bit of documenting this great piece of our history.
And what cameras are you using? What is involved from the documentary standpoint?
For the documentary, we're shooting with a very small Sony RX0 Mark IIs that are basically placed throughout the airplane, recording in 4K mode and then being shuttled off to Jannicke's live stream center down res to 1080. And that's been a kind of a challenge to getting those things working for both of the productions. And then we have the Sony A7s we're shooting with on board, all in 4K, all this as much in 4K as we can. All the ground crews are shooting 4K. You know, one of the things is trying to put all this material into an edit at some point and just having everything sync up as close as we can. So we decided to run every time code piece that has the ability to keep time in universal standard time, so that basically all of our cameras are set to GMT, so we can sync everything up later and the editor will be totally bonkers at that point. But we're trying to help them out as much as we can. And then it's just a matter, we're going to be filming for 48 hours straight, potentially. Just hundreds of media cards of all different sizes. Keeping track of all that's a full-time job. And batteries, charging batteries, keeping things going. We're running off ship power where we can, but a lot of times we can't do that, so we're going to have battery charging going on continually. It's really not unlike what we've done for the space flights in the past. We train the crew, we help them out, and then we make sure they have all the support and the equipment and the things they need. Try to solve problems before they happen in order to not be surprised on orbit. So that's exactly how I approached this to begin with, was just as if it were a shuttle flight.
For me, the vibe of what we're filming is exactly like filming Beautiful Planet. We've got battery bags that are charged and that are uncharged. We've got SD cards that are full, SD cards that are empty. We have our shot list. We have filming the crew inside the vehicle. We have filming the Earth outside the window. All the same stuff we had to go through filming a movie in space we're going through for this. So it's for me personally, it's really striking how similar it is.
With the cinematographers and crew in all the different locations, how large is the crew in total?
Oh, my, that's a good question. We probably have 35 or 40, if not more. So we've got Bill Bennett, ASC, down in Punta Arenas. We've got Nick Sadler in Mauritius and Dan Green in Kazakhstan. And they each have 2 or 3 people with them. And we've got what's basically a small feature unit going on here at the Kennedy Space Center. And because I've just now been roped into flying with them, I'm having to replace myself, so it's going to grow by 1 more at least.
Now, the documentary is going to be released by Untitled Pictures. Is there a timetable, and where will viewers eventually be able to see it?
So that's a question that we're working on. We have an editing team ready to go, and when we get back, we're going to put the edit together. Hopefully, we're going to have a trailer on July 20th at the Legends of Aviation Ball in Europe, and then it will be, off to the different networks to pitch the documentary. So we don't know an exact date or detail yet on that, but it's at the forefront of our mind is flying this flight and getting it filmed, and then on July 12th, we're going to start working on the edit. So hopefully soon.
And Terry, I know that you also have some additional projects in the work. I think you're even developing a TV series. Would you tell us a little bit about some of your other initiatives?
Yes, it's been a busy few months for sure. The TV show idea one of the TV show ideas has been in work here for a few months. Basically, I had a chance to see the world from space when I was there, and I'd like to go visit the places that I saw and find out how the Earth affects people. People live in volcanic regions or in ice-covered regions or in tropical regions, and everybody kind of has this different environment that they live in, but at the end of the day, we're all people. So I would like to do that. Kind of an Anthony Bourdain with a space angle is one of the projects I have going on. I have another book that I'm writing. That manuscript's due at the end of August, so August is going to be a busy month for me for that. We're doing an Apollo 11 flight plan, a limited edition reproduction of the flight plan. That's it's just pretty amazing. It's awesome, but that's also in the work, and so it's a busy July and August for sure.
And again, with the significance of the Apollo 11 anniversary, with this effort and all you're doing, what would you like the public to know about NASA and the space program?
Well, a lot of times people think that the space program is somehow shut down or really shrunken, and that's not true at all. NASA is very involved in flying the space station on a day-to-day basis. They're also very involved with future plans. They're hoping to go back to the moon in the coming years. And there's several new rockets in development. I think the big change nowadays is the private space industry has grown a lot, and companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are really doing innovative and exciting things. And so there's a lot more public-private partnership than there was in the past. In the past, it was all government. And I like to say that we're at the end of the beginning of the space program, and that's a really good thing. The beginning was government and Apollo and Space Shuttle and Space Station, and I think we're at the end of that era, moving into one where it's more private industry. So I think it's exciting now. There's lots of amazing robotic plans. In fact, NASA just launched or they're going to launch a rocket to Titan, which is one of Saturn's moons, and they're going to fly a helicopter around Titan, which is just awesome. I can't wait for that. So there's lots of really cool robotic things going on. It's not just the human stuff.
And now for your world record attempt, you're getting ready to leave tomorrow morning. What is involved today? What are some of the last-minute preparations that all of you will be making?
Right. Well, today has been busy. A lot of it, we just flew down from Savannah and we did a test. So Jannicke was testing out the satellite connectivity, trying to make sure we have the live stream as optimum as possible. We just went through our briefing with the F-104 squadron here. There's a F-104 chase airplane that's going to fly on final when we land with us and hopefully film it. And we've got a crew briefing we've got to do. We've got to go through our gear. You know, we all came here with luggage on United Airlines, and now we've got to pare that down to really minimum stuff. And I have yet another thing that we've done today. I'll let Jannicke tell you about that.
So it was kind of fun. During our testing today, we actually broke an unofficial world record by streaming via satellite. I don't believe anybody in the world has actually streamed for the length that we have from the altitude that we did. So it's going to be quite interesting to do the orbital flight when you want to get really tacky. So everything we do from here on and out is going to be a world record.
Fantastic. How many people are actually going to be on the flight tomorrow, Terry?
So tomorrow we'll be taking off with 9. One of the really cool aspects of this, I can't wait when we get to our first stop in Kazakhstan. My former crewmate, Gennady Padalka, Russian cosmonaut, is going to join us. So he's going to get on the airplane. We'll be 10. And then we're going to fly down to Mauritius, and he's going to get off in Mauritius. Unfortunately, that leg from Mauritius to Chile goes over the South Pole. It's a really, really long leg, and there are no divert airfields. I mean, if you can't land in Antarctica in the wintertime. It's wintertime down there now. So Gennady has to get off for fuel purposes, but that'll be fun to add him. So we're 9 people, and then that one leg we have 10. And I'm sure we're going to reminisce about our time on the space station, and it's kind of one more orbit for him also. I first launched out of Florida, which is where we are, and then his first launch and my last launch was out of Kazakhstan, which is where we're picking him up.
And your crew is also very international, correct?
It's 100% international. Actually, now that we have James, there's 2 Americans. Other than that, it was 9 different nationalities, and so now it's 10 people and 9 nationalities. So. And that's one of our messages, and we're going to talk about that in the documentary. You know, space exploration is a very international thing, and this crew is very international. Those are just the people on the airplane. The ground crews around the world are really international. And Qatar Executive they own the airplane, and really we're able to even attempt this because of them. They have an amazing global presence. It's an extremely international airline. The pilots they're sending to each of these locations to make sure things happen right are all also from different countries in Europe, and mostly Europe. I think there's some South Americans and Africans, and they're from kind of all over the world. So it's a very international operation.
As we move forward, do you see Hollywood and the space exploration community continuing to work together, actually even closer?
I hope so. You know, I loved Apollo 13 because it was real people. You know, CG is great, but I think filming actual humans is even better. And if you want to film a space movie, there's no better location to film it than in space. And as that becomes more possible, I think that's going to happen. So hopefully so.
And it is becoming more possible with technology.
It is. And, you know, SpaceX, but especially Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic are going to be launching space tourists. Now, these are going to be short, only 5 minutes in space flights, but they're going to be launching them maybe this year, if not next year. Other companies like Bigelow have private space stations, so if a production company wanted to get, a few weeks of weightlessness filmed, I think that's going to be possible sooner rather than later.
And for our listeners, where can they go to watch the live stream of your trip?
So our live stream will be on our website, onemooreorbit.com, and there's a big red button. You click on it, and it'll take you to our YouTube streaming channel, very easily laid out.
Well, I know how busy all of you are today, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Thank you, and Godspeed.
Thank you. Good talking to you.